The sun had barely risen, casting a golden glow over the vast fields where old Farmer John had spent his entire life. His wrinkled hands, rough from years of labor, rested on the wooden fence as he gazed upon the land he had nurtured for decades. It was more than just soil and crops. It was his life's work, his dream, and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. But that morning, there was a heaviness in his heart. The recent drought had devastated his harvest, leaving him with nothing but barren land and an uncertain future. His sons, seeing his struggles, had lost hope. They urged him to sell the farm and move to the city. But John wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Sitting on his old wooden chair, he called his children around him. Their faces were filled with frustration and worry. "Dad, there's nothing left here," his eldest son, Michael, said. "The land is dry, the crops have failed, and we're drowning in debt." John smiled faintly, his eyes gleaming with wisdom. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "A story about a man who refused to surrender, no matter how harsh the storm." His children listened, their impatience fading as they saw the determination in their father's gaze. "Many years ago," John began, "there was a young farmer just like me. He had dreams of growing the finest crops, of feeding his family and community. But nature was cruel. One year, heavy rains washed away his seeds. The next, locusts devoured his crops. And now, a drought had stolen his last hope. Everyone around him told him to quit, to leave the land and find an easier life. But he couldn't. His youngest daughter, Emily, frowned. "Why didn't he leave, Dad? If everything was against him, wasn't it foolish to stay?" John chuckled, patting her hand. "Because he understood something most people don't," he replied. "He knew that failure isn't the end. It's a lesson. He knew that the soil, no matter how dry, still had the power to grow. And above all, he knew that true defeat only happens when you stop trying." His children exchanged glances, sensing that the story was more than just a tale. It was their father's truth. John continued, his voice growing softer but stronger. "So, despite his losses, the farmer plowed his fields again. He dug deeper, worked harder, and prayed for rain. And one day, when everyone else had given up, the clouds returned. The rain fell, soaking the earth, and his crops flourished. While others had abandoned their land, he had stayed. And because of that, he reaped the greatest harvest of his life." Silence filled the room as John's children absorbed his words. They had seen their father toil endlessly, never complaining, always believing that things would get better. And now, despite the hardships, he still had that same unwavering faith. "Dad," Michael finally said, his voice thick with emotion, "are you saying we shouldn't give up?" John nodded. "I'm saying that life will test you. It will break you down, make you doubt yourself, and push you to the edge. But the ones who succeed, the ones who truly win, are those who refuse to quit." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she reached for her father's callous hand. "And what if the rain never comes?" she whispered. John smiled, his eyes glistening. "Then you dig deeper, plan again, and keep believing. Because hope is like a seed, it may take time. But if you nurture it, it will always find a way to grow." The next morning, John's children didn't talk about leaving. Instead, they joined him in the fields, turning the soil, preparing for a new season. The land was still dry, the future still uncertain, but something had changed. Hope had been planted, and that was enough to begin again. Months later, the skies finally opened and rain poured down on their land. The crops grew stronger than ever before. But more than that, John's lesson had taken root in his children's hearts. They had learned the most valuable truth of all. No matter how many times life knocks you down, as long as you keep going, you never truly lose. And so, the farm thrived once again, not just because of the rain, but because of father's unwavering belief that hope and perseverance can conquer even the harshest of storms.